Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. We're live at the Agency of Agriculture. I'm very excited to present to you today a webinar about resources for your working lands business, both technical resources and capital resources that you may have heard about a few, but this hopefully will give you a good overview for your business. And just a good sense of where to look next and what might be a good fit for you right now. So we're really excited to be here, and so I'm Noelle Savoyan, Working Lands Coordinator out of the Agency of Ag. Here with me I have Jared Duval, the Economic Development Director at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. He also sits as a designee for Deputy Secretary Lucy Larish on the Working Lands Enterprise Board. We also here in the room have Ella Chapin. She will be a presenter today for the Technical Assistance Resources, and she also sits as an ex officio member on the Working Lands Enterprise Board. And she works at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, and she runs the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program. On the line, we also have Janice St. Onge. She will be presenting for us as well from the Flexible Capital Fund. And joining us at this moment is Chelsea Lewis, and she is our Business Development Section Chief, also on the Working Lands Enterprise Board. So welcome. Thanks for being here. And we have Ella and Janice. Nice photos of them. Thank you for our partners and our presenters today. Here's Chelsea and myself. We're part of the Working Lands support team for the initiative and for the board. Melissa Moon and Emma Hansen not with us today, but vital components of the Working Lands team. Jared Duval with us in the room today.
Hi, everybody.
And Matt Linglis, designee to Commissioner Michael Snyder of Forest Parks and Rec. He was unable to join us today, but he is also a vital component on the board and for the initiative in terms of providing technical assistance and just providing valuable support. So a little overview of what we will be covering today. I will be walking us through the stages of business development just so you can get a sense of where you find that you fit right now, and you can just think about those different stages and what they mean to you, and just you can reflect on those. Then I will hand the reins over to Ella Chapin, who's with us here in the room, and she will be going over available technical assistance that might be helpful for your business. And then we will introduce Janice St. Onge from the Flexible Capital Fund, and she will walk us through a really cool capital continuum. So identifying your business. You can be anywhere from pre-venture to revitalization, and in the middle there we have startup, growth, and maturity. So there's a wide array of where your business could be right now. So I usually don't read from slides, but I thought it would be helpful to do so just to get the definition and to think about what it means to be pre-venture. So pre-venture, you basically have an idea. It refers to something that's not yet in existence, but you have the idea in your head, you're ready to write down everything on paper, and you want to get moving. So opportunities for new products or services are identified, but the supply chain and market outlet are unclear, and proof of concept might not yet be established. Planning and research testing recipes, for example, writing a business plan, and finding startup funding really pertain to this stage of business development. So you have your idea, and you start thinking, I need to get moving, writing things down on paper, testing things out. Your next stage is your startup stage. So you're moving, you're launching your business, you're hiring your first employees, you're setting up your systems, you're getting to your break-even point, building your customer base, establishing a track record for product quality and service. This might not just be a year, this could be many years, depending on how long it really takes you and your business to get going and to really establish themselves in the market. So things for this stage, you might not yet have your own facility, but you might be seeking opportunities at, for example, the Food Venture Center, which we'll talk about later, some shared space to really get your business to the next level. And that next level is the growth stage. So businesses in the growth stage, they're really expanding. They're moving, they're increasing their production, their sales are going up, they might be hiring people, they're improving their infrastructure, buying that new equipment that they need, and really making improvements to improve their overall efficiency or whatever their targets might be. What's important for this stage of development is that this type of growth and business expansion as a whole, it requires more than just increased sales and employment. So in this stage, you might need to assess and adjust the overall organization and the overall structure of your business, the delegation of management, and the development of longer-term strategies for human resources, access to capital, and expansion. So you might need to go through a strategic planning process. So this is I find this to be a very exciting stage. The next stage of development is defined as the mature stage. So mature companies have achieved a solid business that, because of either their market conditions or the preference of owners, they appear sustainable. They appear to be in a good spot. They're hitting their targets, and they're not coasting, but without dramatic change, companies in this stage are unlikely to expand significantly. So they're really past that big growth stage. They've achieved strong brand recognition, solid repeat customer base, but they often also face many challenges. Things in the marketplace are always changing, so they need to be aware of that. And facing declining sales, for example, could be really difficult for this company who's set. So a focus here on problem solving, leadership, and quality improvement is often necessary for a mature business to maintain its position in the marketplace. Sometimes planning for the succession of a leadership or creating an exit strategy for the business could be an appropriate strategy, depending on your business and where you are. Last but not least, the revitalization stage. This arises when external or internal activities, or both, force a mature business to a tipping point. A downward trend may ensue, or innovative challenger firms may introduce new ideas, products, or services to revive the sector. So taking action in the maturity stage can send an organization in new directions. Innovation and diversification can lead to new products and new markets. Companies can be recognized to provide the flexibility needed to meet the new challenges associated with new directions, markets, and products. So at this point, I'm going to hand the controls over to Ella Chapin, our board member and director of the Farm and Forest Viability Program at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board.
Thanks, Noelle.
Yeah.
So I'm going to walk through this slide and spend a little time here and talk about the different kinds of technical assistance, particularly really business assistance, professional assistance there at the top. But after I give you a little overview on that, we're really focusing here on business resources, business assistance. And then we have a variety of slides that just outline some of the actual organizations and what they do, and we will, and I will go through those somewhat rather briefly, focusing on some of the statewide resources that are available for all working lands businesses, but queuing you into some specific resources that are out there. So to start, production assistance is certainly a kind of technical assistance. And the technical assistance is so broad. It could cover anything from visiting your accountant to getting an engineer to work on a project to getting a business advisor in there to work with you over a long period of time. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're focused more on business assistance. But I'm putting this in there just to remind ourselves that there are so many different people out there providing production-related assistance. And often businesses are more cued into who those people are already. They are industry associations, fellow farmers or foresters, or people in your industry that you already know and know a lot about production or have been doing it longer than you, or are also starting up at the same time and have a slightly different background. So production assistance can come from a very wide range of places, thinking of things like UVM's grazing programs, horticultural specialists, the Proctor Maple Research Center and what it offers to maple producers, organic production methods and trainings and certification assistance at the Northeast Organic Farming Association, engineering help from UVM specialists or at the USDA NRCS. So just pointing out that that's a big piece of technical assistance, but we're not going to spend much time on it today. And the following resources don't really list technical assistance as much as business assistance. And the rest of what's on this list is sort of how I sort of put into some categories various kinds of business focus, financial and business focused technical assistance. So to start with, financial record keeping and analysis. So this would be sitting down with an advisor to better understand financial statements, put together your balance sheet, your income statement, cash flow projections, 3 basic financial statements that most business owners should know what they are and know how to put them together and understand them and use them to make financial decisions. Organizing your financial information into that can be a daunting task if you don't have a lot of experience. So there are a variety of people out there that can support a business owner in better understanding and organizing their financial record keeping. Setting up QuickBooks is a pretty key process that a lot of businesses go through. There are other software programs out there other than QuickBooks, but we find the vast majority of business owners are using QuickBooks in our sector. And then even for businesses that have been using QuickBooks for a decade, we often find a business advisor coming in might help that business owner rearrange their QuickBooks, change their chart of accounts to match sort of their goals and how they want to organize their information so they get better information and data out of QuickBooks. So that's a variety of kinds of financial record keeping technical assistance that we have. And then there's sort of the analysis of it, getting your cash flow projection, understanding really, can I make this investment in my business over the next few years without getting stuck in a cash flow situation. So again, this could be one meeting with somebody to help you set up your QuickBooks in a better format, or it could be a series of meetings over a longer period of time to analyze the financial realities of a business move. Feasibility analysis is typically what's looked at when you're looking at a new product or a new or new markets for your existing products, and really trying to understand, and much of this is financial analysis, the sort of feasibility of going in this direction before you just do it, or as you're doing it, better understand the realities and make, again, sort of have the data in front of you to make some decisions about that production change. Feasibility analyses are sometimes required for certain federal programs, such as USDA Rural Development's Value-Added Producer Grant Program. They require a third-party feasibility analysis for new markets, and that's something that our program and others help business owners do in order to prepare for that kind of an application. And certainly a lender or someone else, anyone else in the financing sector who's who's being asked to support a new product development or a new marketing scheme might really want to see that feasibility analysis. Market research and marketing planning is a pretty broad area, but to name some different kinds of activities that would happen with a marketing specialist or a marketing workshop that you might attend would be anything from sort of figuring out what your brand is, what your story is, what is it that you're really marketing, not just this cheese, but actually what's the story behind it that you're marketing. Market sizing, looking at data that's accessible from everything from sort of federal data that's collected to local information and where to find that data so that you can size your market. Think about your competition. Are you competing against half a dozen other cheesemakers in the county, or are you competing against sort of a low quality national brand that is really what you're competing against in the marketplace? So understanding your competition and really and thinking about how your product compares. Target customers. That could be everyone within a 50-mile radius, or to be a little bit more specific, you could be targeting women in their 40s and 50s. So really getting a handle on who your target audience is for your product. The more you can nail that down, the better likelihood you are to make the right investments in your marketing. Even if you only have a $500 marketing budget, still figuring out how you're going to best utilize those resources. And then really putting together a marketing plan can, again, take all of those different pieces I just mentioned into account, but like, who's your target market audience? What's your product? How are you going to market it to them? Who's going to buy it? And how are you going to test your market and really get some feedback along the way? And this could be for a new product, or this could just be, I want to expand sales of this product, and I want to better understand who out there might buy it. Right now I sell it to lots of small retail stores, but I'd like to see what larger stores might be willing to carry a product, something like that. So I'll mention some of these as we look at the specific assistance programs. We'll come back to some of these topics and mention who does some of this work. But that's a pretty big area of market research, market planning, brand development, and then there's website development, logo design, materials design, that sort of all falls under that sector as well. Business planning. Business planning captures actually a number of things above and below it on the bullet list. Business planning is usually a lengthy, in-depth process that you can do on your own, just like many of these, everything on here you can work on your own. But finding an advisor to help you with a business plan means really building a trusting relationship over the course of a long period of time, and looking at everything from sort of what's our mission of our business, what is our financial reality, where are we right now financially, and what are our goals in 3 to 5 years, and how are we going to get there, and how does our plan to increase production, increase staff, change to another location, how does that all align with a financial plan, and making sure that you looked at that in depth and then literally have a plan to start implementing. Some of the reasons people do a business plan is, as Noelle stated, at a pre-venture or startup phase, just putting down on paper what your concepts are. At a startup phase, maybe you're 3 or 5 years in and you aren't really to that sustainable level of, maybe you haven't quite hit break even. What's the plan to get you past that next growth stage? And then maybe you're at a mature stage, but you want to think about, okay, how do we not just get into a slump of slightly decreased or level sales and not a lot of change? So what's our vision for the future, and how are we going to get there? And at that stage of business, you might be doing it with a number of the staff and the management team as a process. And then even at the revitalization stage, you might need a business plan to address some critical problems that are confronting the business, challenges and such. So there's a real variety of points in a business where you might want a business plan, and it might be in your head, it might be on the back of an envelope, or you might, especially if you're going after financing, want it in a pretty substantially written, documented package. So, but regardless, most business owners have a business plan in some way, shape, or form, and the more you want to engage with somebody else to bounce those ideas off and get feedback, the more formal you might want that business plan to be. Succession planning can be fairly related to business planning, but usually involves an exit strategy, a retirement plan for the generation that's moving away from owning and operating the business, and some kind of business plan and transfer of assets plan for an incoming owner. And this can look like a lot of different things, and it typically takes anywhere to really build a succession plan and implement it. Typically is like a 3 to 10 year process. But the act of actually working through, again, on paper, the details of what that looks like, both financially and in terms of management shift, is really an important process to go through, and documenting it, again, can be really helpful for contracts, agreements, and everybody understanding what everyone's intentions are, and then again for financing for a next ownership will be pretty critical. HR and management coaching. Management coaching we tend to define as, again, that sort of same kind of one-on-one, in-depth, long-term business advising, but at the stage of growth where a business owner doesn't necessarily need a business plan. What they really need is help moving management from sort of their single owner operator style or current configuration to more of a management team, and thus the growth stage is often, business around $1 million to $2 million shifting, trying to grow towards a $5 million business tends to be the sort of range in growth sales that we see this most needed at, but that can really depend on the business model. But what we really find critical is helping business owners who have been really in the weeds with the everyday operation, moving towards a place where they can more purely work on the business and in a management and in a business owner management capacity, and that they have a management team who are involved in all critical business decisions and are set up to really manage the day-to-day. So that's a pretty big transition for a lot of businesses where the business owner hasn't managed many businesses in the past. They've been growing this pretty organically on their own, and that can be a pretty challenging transition. It often aligns also with new facilities, major expansion of production, and things that bring many challenges all at the same time and stress the human resource and management capacity. So we often find that HR piece really critical at this stage, although you might be getting some HR human resource advising at a business planning stage also, but that management coaching, when you're really trying to shift people's job responsibilities towards management, can take a lot of HR systems to be put in place, job descriptions to be completely revamped across the whole organization and stuff like that. So we've been using that management coaching terminology to mean that here in Vermont over the past handful of years. And then we have lean manufacturing, which is a little bit related to production assistance, but we have it here separately listed just because it's a pretty key and for manufacturing particularly can be a very key business-related assistance program, but not just in manufacturing. We find it useful in organizations and other kinds of business operations that aren't so manufacturing-based, because lean manufacturing is basically about being particularly aware of how your workflow happens, where there's waste, and getting rid of that waste to be more efficient and more lean. So it's a concept that can be used in a pretty broad way, and we do have one assistance provider here in the state that I'll mention later, particularly providing assistance in this way. So we have it here as well. So I think that brings me to the end of this slide. I guess I also wanted to say, before we get into the variety of organizations that provide technical assistance on the business assistance side, that I want to just say up front that many of the people who provide these different kinds of services can be a great resource for referrals to others in this industry. So I just want to say that right up front and encourage you to not get overwhelmed by the coming list of organizations that provide business assistance, and probably similar for financial assistance, and Janice can speak to this. But knowing that starting with any one of these, it seems like a good fit, and then you may also get referrals through that person that you start with on the phone to find other resources and on all these different topics.
And just a quick note before Ella continues, all of these resources that you'll see on the coming pages, this will be this webinar is being recorded, so they'll all be in the webinar. We will also have the PowerPoint version, so no need to like jot things down really quick. Of course you can if you want to, but we'll show you exactly where this will be posted at the end on the Working Lands website. Okay, so here's a list of statewide business assistance that's available to both agricultural and forestry sector business owners. To start with, the Vermont Small Business Development Center offers advising across the state. There's, I think, something like 13 or 14 different advisors co-located typically with regional development corporations across all the different regions. So in any jurisdiction, you'll have a business advisor in your area that you can see if what kind of assistance they might provide one-on-one. They often also offer workshops, business development workshops, financial planning workshops, and a variety of other services that are largely free to the business owner and supported in large part by the Small Business Administration. So the Vermont Small Business Development Center tends to have advisors who work with all kinds of businesses and may or may not know a lot about the exact kind of business that you operate, but know a lot about coaching businesses through various growth, and particularly startups. We often send business owners who are at that pre-venture stage, who really have some ideas, haven't figured out exactly how to sort of work them through to a business strategy. The Vermont Small Business Development Center staff can be particularly helpful in that area, and many of the other programs don't necessarily work at pre-venture, at the pre-venture stage. The Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program, which I am the director of, which is based at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, has grown over the past 2 to 3 years to include forestry. It's been offering farm business planning since 2003. And we're really a network of a whole bunch of organizations that do the one-on-one business advising, and we provide business planning, transfer planning, feasibility analysis, and financial planning, and sometimes some other assistance as well. So in general, our program and the partners that we work with provide long-term 12 to 18 months of one-on-one advising to do any of those various things, as well as a lot of market planning and market research. Our partners include UVM Extension has a farm viability program, and now a forest business program, both under the umbrella of the viability program. Intervale Center runs programs for farm businesses. The Center for an Agricultural Economy works with both ag and forestry businesses under our program, and NOFA Vermont and Land for Good. So a real variety of organizations that have staff, as well as we have a variety of independent contractors, and our goal is to match each business with the right organization or independent consultant that is the right fit for your stage of business, the kinds of products you produce, your business model, and your personality. So we're sort of a matchmaking service in that way, and then also make sure that the services provided on the program are high quality, in-depth, long-lasting. So that's the viability program. We serve pretty much everyone across the agricultural and forestry spectrum, from forestry firms to loggers and mill and kiln operators to small-scale manufacturing and even sometimes larger-scale manufacturing. Our next two, well, I'll just go one by one. The Vermont Agriculture and Forest Products Development Program works with about 8 clients a year. The viability program, we work with about 75 to 100 businesses a year. The Agriculture Forest Products Development Program is a much more focused, it's really one primary consultant, John Ryan, and then a few others that he brings in at times to work in that growth stage on management coaching. So as I was talking about the management coaching, really focusing on businesses above 500,000 to $1 million in sales and trying to really grow into multi-million-dollar businesses is that program's specialty. Often the businesses that are a good fit for this kind of management coaching are really seeing a huge opportunity for expansion, and thus need to really transition to a more management team, find more flexible and more creative financing packages, and really could utilize coaching through all of that.
The Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center provides workshops, training offerings, particularly on lean manufacturing and a variety of related topics. And both I was going to go back and say that the viability program we tend to offer for most businesses, there's a $75 program fee, and then much of our consulting is publicly funded. The Ag and Forest Products Development Program typically is a cost share of about $5,000 from the business, and the rest of the program is paid for in other ways. And then the Vermont Manufacturing Extension Center is often a cost share also, and really depends on the scope of work and the client and the business. So I'll stop there and just add that there are, in addition to this group of organizations providing a variety of kinds of business assistance to all kinds of working lands businesses, there are also a number of independent consultants that do this work for fee for service, and the viability program has an extensive list of those if we can be helpful in making referrals to independent consultants also. And again, all of us on this page all know each other's programs really well and can help you figure out where you're going to find the right type of technical assistance for your business. Next page. Additional business resources available, sort of statewide, although these are more focused on not just working lands businesses, but all kinds of businesses. Regional development corporations can provide all kinds of technical assistance and sometimes financial assistance to growth stage businesses, helping look for a site for a new facility, dealing with some regulatory challenges. They provide workshops, networking events, one-on-one technical assistance to some degree, and many of them have revolving loan funds, so you'll hear about them again a little bit later. And again, they're often co-located, or the small business advisors often co-located with a regional development corporation staff. SCORE is a mentoring program. It's a national program that aligns CEOs and other business owners to mentor earlier stage business owners. There's one in Chittenden County, and I think there also might now be a new one down in perhaps Brattleboro. I'm not sure about that. So they're regional, and they're not necessarily available statewide, but it's a national program that you could start a chapter anywhere in the country. University of Vermont Extension provides so many different kinds of resources to communities and businesses and individuals that we have them listed here as just additional statewide resources. They do offer workshops, classes, videos, online resources in things like farm transfer, financial planning, tax preparation, insurance, a number of different topics. So generally is a good place to see if they have some resources for whatever you might be looking for. They are a pretty full service university. Now I'm just going to briefly go through one page on resources for agriculture, and then one page on resources for forestry products businesses, and then we're going to transition into talking. Janice will transition into talking about financial resources. So quickly on, there's a number of organizations, and this doesn't even capture it, that are specific to ag and food businesses. Again, University of Vermont provides all kinds of particular production and business assistance. You can see a variety of things there. Many of the organizations, actually all four of the organizations on this page, particularly provide a lot of new farmer and startup stage, pre-venture and startup stage assistance on the agricultural side that the business assistance programs on the previous page do not, because they tend to invest a lot more in each business. These organizations tend to provide a variety of workshops as well as some one-on-one assistance to startup farm businesses. The Northeast Organic Farming Association targets technical assistance for organic or transitioning to organic farms, including mentor programs where you can have a business mentor from another business mentor you in the startup stage, as well as all kinds of workshops, a full suite of workshops, many of which are planned in coordination with the University of Vermont and others on this page. The Center for Agricultural Economy provides one-on-one business assistance, as I mentioned, through the viability program, and also lots of assistance to food businesses that are using the Food Venture Center to test business ideas, try products, scale up a food business. The Intervale Center provides both incubator farm space in Intervale in Burlington, as well as a variety of business assistance through the viability program and outside of the viability program. The Intervale and UVM Extension both provide a fair amount of farmland access assistance too, in addition to the Vermont Land Trust and other organizations. I also wanted to mention that the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets provides all kinds of technical assistance, particularly production assistance and regulatory assistance. And then there are a lot of regional organizations that provide resources like Rutland Area Farm and Food Link, Vital Communities, Addison County Relocalization Network that provide like workshops, speaking farmer trainings, networking events. So there's no end to the resources for agriculture in our state. I also want to mention two programs that are not listed on here, but we'll probably add them later, but write them down if, since they're not on here right now. One is Farm First, which is an employee assistance program that's been made available largely by the State Agency of Vermont and other partners' efforts over the years, which, if you're familiar with employee assistance programs, is available to the business owner and their families of all farm businesses in Vermont free of charge. You don't have to sign up. All you have to do is call to really get referrals and support on any kind of like really stressful situations you're dealing with, from HR issues to financial issues to emotional stress, feelings of suicide, concern about the state of your business or regulatory issues, you name it. You can call and get some good referrals, and not just referrals, but they'll help sort of case manage any issue that comes up. So really important program in our state. And then also the Vermont Ag Mediation Program, which helps resolve conflicts, particularly with USDA agencies, free of charge to farmers, and then can also be useful for mediation around family conflicts with other lenders also. And last but not least, a slide on resources specific to forestry sector businesses. The Department of Forest, Parks and Rec and the county foresters across the state provide an array of technical assistance and marketing assistance and other kinds of support services. The Vermont Wood Manufacturers Association is a pretty key entity helping link and network wood manufacturers across the state and promote that industry in a variety of markets. And then the Northern Forest Center provides a variety of programs across a multi-state region, so focusing more on northern Vermont, but will work with businesses across the state. Particularly, they provide some kinds of manufacturing assistance, management coaching, and other kinds of growth stage, mature stage business assistance programs, similar to the Ag and Forest Products Development Program, and closely linked with the viability program. So again, you can talk with us at the viability program. We can help you figure out which of these programs are the best fit. And I also wanted to mention that the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund is also developing a new program to provide some business assistance and technical assistance in the forestry product sector that will be looking at sort of groups of businesses along the value chain and how to support the growth in connecting the value chain across business sectors, and that will be the upcoming project soon. So I'm going to turn it over to Janice St. Onge, a wonderful resource at the Flexible Capital Fund, and let her introduce herself as we move over to her slides.
Great, thanks so much, Ella. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you here.
Excellent, great. I'm hoping everybody else can as well. So I'm Janice St. Onge. I run a small investment program called the Flexible Capital Fund. And I'm going to provide a brief overview of not so much all the various financing programs that are in the state, but some things you need to consider when you're looking at funding the growth of your business. And I guess I wanted to start with the fact that it's not your grandfather's Buick, meaning it's not the same financing scene it was even 5 or 10 years ago. I don't know if folks have seen that commercial where there's a woman on the phone and she's coming out of the restaurant looking for her friend. She's talking to her friend, and her friend says, hey, I'm right over here. I'm in the Buick. I see you. And her friend looks around, and she's doesn't see the Buick, and then she thinks, okay, maybe that's it right across the street. There's an old beater car with a young man eating a sandwich in his car, and she hops in the car and she looks at the guy and goes, oops, I think I'm in the wrong car. And he's like, who are you? She gets out of the car and her friend's laughing because she can see her from the window. And she says, I'm right here in the Buick. So her friend realizes that this really nice, sleek-looking car is her friend's car, and she gets in and she goes, Buick, huh? Nice. So the idea is that it's, this is not an environment today where you can go to a bank, fill out an application, and on a handshake get a loan. Things have changed a lot. In many ways, it's very positive. In many ways, it can be overwhelming. There's, as I mentioned before, you can, in terms of creativity, you can finance your business through avenues like debt or equity or vendor financing, or going to doing the Vermont Small Business Offering Exemption. All of these things are words that didn't necessarily come up on the radar screen for entrepreneurs even 5 years ago. And we're going to talk through a little bit of those various funding sources as well as types of instruments you can use to grow your business. One thing I did want to just make sure people understood is that one size may not fit all. So you had heard earlier from Noelle about the various stages of growth of a business. And you have different needs for financing depending on that stage of growth, the size of the business you are, and the scale that you want to grow into. So when you're starting out as a small business, you may not be able to take on debt. You may need to go to friends, family, and fools, as we call them, to finance that early stage. And then as you get bigger and you grow in markets beyond Vermont, for example, you may need to look at more, you may need to look at outside capital, whether that's equity or debt from an alternative lender. So again, one size may not fit all. The other point I wanted to make is that right now we've really seen this trend in folks wanting to invest locally in businesses that are right in their communities. So what's happened in the last couple of years is at the federal level and now at the state level, it's become easier for a Main Street investor, not necessarily a high net worth individual, but a Main Street investor like you and I, to actually invest locally in the businesses that are in their communities. And that includes a lot more activity investing local in food businesses. So remembering that in addition to all of the various sources of capital that may be more traditional on your radar, like the banks and lenders and the Vermont Economic Development Authority, your neighbor could be a source of capital. So just keeping that in mind, that there is this interest in investing local. And then I guess the last thing I'll point out here is that you may need more than one kind of money. Oftentimes it may take 3 different kinds of money, debt and equity or something in between, to help you finance the growth of your business. And that may be different kinds of money along the different stages of growth that you are at. So overall, it's a very different environment. It can be more complex in many ways, but I think it's actually a really exciting time for an entrepreneur who is looking to start and grow their business, to find ways that are going to best match how they want to grow their business and in what time frame. So with that, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So does everybody have their glasses on, or this is a little bit of an eye test here, so I apologize. But this is really just a mechanism to show in one image the variety of kinds of money that are out there, how it functions in terms of low risk, low reward, all the way up to high risk, high reward for investors and funders. And then also to give some examples of the kinds of organizations that are out there providing capital to small and medium-sized businesses. So the first thing I wanted to point out here is that the concept that the lower the risk for an organization who's putting money and investing money into a company, the lower the reward to that organization. So typically, banks and traditional lenders are going to be looking for not only your ability to repay them based on your cash flow, but they're going to also be looking for collateral. Do you have assets? Do you have equipment or real estate that they can secure. So the more collateral and the more known your cash flow is, the lower the rate they can charge you, and so that's going to be your lower cost of capital. Now, going to the far right-hand side of the capital continuum, it would follow that the higher risk of an investor or a lender, the higher reward or the more return on their money they're going to want to see. They're taking more risk, so they should have some more upside. So that's typically the case when an angel investor or a venture fund or your neighbor who's looking to own a piece of your company invest equity, meaning they get a percentage of ownership in the business without any known return until and unless you sell the business or you buy them out. And so that's very risky. So their returns are going to be much higher. And then you've got everything in between, from subordinated debt, and we'll talk a little bit about this as well, where it's probably a little more risky because maybe it's a lender that has a lien on your assets, but it's behind the bank. Royalty financing, which is the kind of instrument that the Flexible Capital Fund uses, whereby we give a business a loan and we get repaid over time based on a percentage of their revenue. So when this company has lower revenues and is starting to grow, their payments are lower, and as they grow their revenue base and have the ability to pay a higher rate, their monthly payment is higher. So it's more flexible, and it provides the ability of the company to adjust their cash flow based on their revenues. Convertible debt is in between debt and equity, where typically it's a debt instrument that can be converted into equity at some period in the future, and typically any interest on that debt is deferred until that convertible term is up, and the investor has the ability to then decide, I want to term it out and get paid monthly principal and interest, or I want an ownership position in the business. So from an instrument perspective, you know, there's all of these different kinds of instruments, and sometimes you may need debt for financing a piece of equipment. Sometimes you may need equity because you need to fund staffing and marketing costs that are sometime in the future, or sometime royalty may be a good fit where you're growing rapidly but you don't want to give up ownership in the business, and royalty may be an example. So that's a brief overview of kind of the risk and reward. The other piece of this visual is really about the fact that there are many organizations out there providing this kind of money. And I would venture to say, like Ella indicated on the business assistance side, you could start with any one of the organizations listed here and beyond. And if you weren't a right fit for that organization, they'd help you find where you need to go. And sometimes you may need to go to the Flexible Capital Fund and the bank and to the North Country Angels to get a package that's going to work for you to help you grow. The other thing in the periphery on this visual you'll see is that sometimes people don't always think about structure beyond either a loan or giving up equity in the business. So bootstrapping, vendor and customer financing is also a way in early stage to help grow the business. Now, obviously, you need to have that vendor or customer be in partnership with you and not just take it for granted that they will finance your growth over time. Grants, again, they're few and far between, but there are programs, as you'll hear about, with the Working Lands Enterprise Fund. Foundations in the state of Vermont are very active in the food and forest space, and then USDA rural development. And then lastly, what's been interesting over the last 5 to 7 years that I've seen is that foundations and philanthropic organizations are not only doing grant making, but they're also investing directly in for-profit businesses that have a shared mission. So they are looking at doing what's called a program-related investment, where they'll provide equity or debt directly to a for-profit business, often side by side with organizations like us at the Flex Fund or the Community Loan Fund. So they are a source of capital, not as readily available as some of the other organizations out there, but I wanted to bring that up. And then under that line, again, to make it even more complicated, there's sources of capital, organizations, but how do you find those organizations, and how do you find these individual investors that I mentioned that are now very interested in looking at investing local in their communities? So again, last 5 years, what's really come up to the surface are networks and crowdfunding platforms. So starting on the left there, the Vermont Food Investors Network, which is part of Slow Money Vermont, an organization that helps network entrepreneurs and Main Street investors to find opportunities. The Food Investors Network has just launched in Vermont, and they're working with an organization called Milk Money, which is in the next piece over under crowdfunding platforms, to do a series of events around the state to bring entrepreneurs and Main Street investors together to have conversations about how to grow your business. And after this seminar, I can send out a list to Noel and Chelsea and circulating when those events are happening, because there's many of them coming up all around the state. And it's just, if nothing else, the ability to get out there and meet folks who might be interested in investing in your business and meet other entrepreneurs who are seeking capital. So as I mentioned before, Food Investors Network is a network. They don't invest directly, but they bring people together, crowdfunding platforms. So we'll talk briefly about the Vermont Small Business Offering Exemption, which is a result of basically what Vermont is calling their crowdfunding rules, allowing Main Street investors now to invest in small businesses, and small businesses are now allowed to seek out capital from not just accredited or high net worth individuals, but from their neighbors, and advertise along that front as long as they meet certain criteria. And there is a link to the Small Business Offering Exemption criteria on the Department of Financial Regulations website. Again, I can send out these links for folks. But with those new rules, it's making it easier for small businesses to go to their neighbor and raise $5,000 or $10,000 at a time to advertise about what they're doing and how they're going to grow the business. And there are platforms like Milk Money and DesignBook that are helping make that offering easier. So DesignBook and Milk Money, for example, are two organizations that provide assistance to entrepreneurs to help them find investment online and then through these networking events. The next piece over, intermediaries and networks, again, I mentioned Slow Money Vermont, and that is an organization that has just come about in the last 5 years. And really, again, an opportunity to put on events and provide resources to match entrepreneurs with Main Street investors. And I will send out a link as well for their Facebook page. They don't have a website at this point. The other types of tools that are out there, and I mentioned briefly, was Friends, Family, and Fools. So many startup and early stage companies start with their mom and dad, their brother and sister, their neighbors, folks who who we put on the fools list, but that's really more terminology. But the idea is there that you've got friendly capital coming in that is patient while you begin to really grow the company and get ready for that next stage of capital. And then lastly, not to be diminished, are credit enhancements. So oftentimes businesses will go to a lender, a traditional lender or a bank, or even the Vermont Economic Development Authority, which is our state's lending arm, and there may not be enough collateral, or the personal guarantee isn't sufficient. So the U.S. Small Business Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and also the Vermont Economic Development Authority have what they call guarantee programs. So you can apply along with the other lending type instruments at banks to get a guarantee that helps alleviate the risk on the bank's part, so they may be more willing to give you that loan. So again, the whole idea of the capital continuum is really to help show you that there are a lot of different kinds of money. There are different kinds of organizations out there that are providing capital to businesses. You can start at any point in that continuum And I would venture to say that most folks would be able to get you where you need to go if you are not a fit for their type of lending or criteria. So if you can switch to the next slide. So we have talked pretty much about all of these types of instruments, and that's really what they are, instruments to help you grow your business. Debt is basically a loan that needs to get repaid over time, and typically there's an interest component. Equity is when someone invests in the business, meaning they put in money in the business and have an ownership position. Oftentimes, equity may also involve that investor having a decision-making role in business as well as a seat on the board. And so when taking on equity, businesses need to really think about, do I want to give up control? Do I want to give up decision-making? Equity is also can be more patient, meaning it really requires an exit from the company, whereby the company would either sell or buy the investor out. So that's somewhat longer-term funds that doesn't get repaid immediately. So in the near equity and royalty, I talked a little bit about from the standpoint of royalty functions somewhat like equity, where it's a little more flexible in the early stages of the business as it grows. So you have lower payments that fluctuate based on the company's revenues. So if you have a bad month in a particular year, you're going to pay a lower payment than you might pay necessarily if you were locked into a set principal and interest payment. Convertible debt, mentioned briefly before, a lot of folks who are doing these Vermont Small Business Offering exemptions are using convertible debt as a bridge to determining whether they want to do an equity round or to raise equity, because with convertible debt, you defer principal and interest payments until that 3 or 5 year term, but you're accruing interest over time, and then the investor has the right to convert to equity at that 3 or 5 year term down the road. And oftentimes it avoids having to come up with a valuation of the company where you might need to do that when an investor puts money in his equity. Typically they're going to put X amount of dollars in and expect to get a certain percentage of ownership in that business. Grants, I think most folks are familiar. They're few and far between, but they don't have to be repaid, but are often, most of the time, very much mission aligned with what that organization wants to put out. Incentives, we talked a little bit about that from the standpoint of there are tax incentives, there are incentives at the state for reduced fees on business assistance, that sort of thing. Guarantees, there are corporate guarantees, as I mentioned before, like USDA and SBA that can provide to help a bank feel better about making the loan. And then there are personal guarantees. And most of your collateral-based lenders on the low-risk, low-reward side are going to ask for you to personally guarantee those loans. And then lastly, vendors and customers we talked about as a source. Would highly recommend that you don't forget that they are a source of capital. So let's move on. I know we're running out of time. Getting ready for the money. I think these are questions that I really want to encourage all entrepreneurs to think about when they're raising capital, or preferably 6 months before they need to raise capital, because it does take time. The first thing is, how do you want to grow your business? How quickly, how big, how fast, I always say. Because if you want to grow it steadily versus growing it really fast and selling out of state, that's going to require a different kind of capital than looking at growing it to a regional or national market and growing at 30, 40, 50% year over year. Two different kinds of capital, again, really depending on what you have in mind for the business and for your own personal growth as well. How will you use the capital? That's the other piece. If you are using the capital to purchase a piece of equipment, you're not going to go out and look for equity investment for that, because equity is really a better fit for the kinds of monies that the kind of capital that you can't secure with a fixed asset. So lower cost of capital for fixed assets mean you would typically go to a bank or a community loan fund or an alternative lender to purchase the asset, because they can secure the asset. It reduces their risk and their cost of capital to you. If you need the capital to add staff or to go to trade shows or to grow, to build a brand, that's typically what we would call permanent working capital. And that's harder to secure because there's no assets behind it. People walk out your door at 6 o'clock at night and you can't secure them. You can't put a lien on people. So oftentimes that's going to mean a higher risk kind of capital, whether it's royalty or equity. How much time and energy can you devote to raising capital? Okay, that's a big one, because first of all, if you need capital tomorrow and you're just starting today to look for it, not a good tactic. You need to be thinking months ahead about the kind of capital that you want to raise and how much time you personally have to put into that effort. Because when you put effort and energy into raising capital, it's taking away from your ability to run the business. So if you need to be running your business full time and you don't have the time and energy, that's when Ella talked about accessing business assistance, trying to find help in helping you be efficient and thinking through what kind of capital you might need. The other piece is knowing your funder, okay? Across that continuum, there are a lot of different kinds of organizations out there. They all have their own values and mission that they're trying to accomplish. You need to be sure that how you want to grow your business and the values and mission of your business are in alignment with those funders. Because if not, you may get the money, but when it comes to difficult times or high growth and your funder is saying, whoa, you know, you need to slow it down because you're not going to have cash flow to pay me back, but you really want to grow, that's a misalignment. Or if you've got taken on equity where that expectations of that investor is saying, you need to get growing 30, 40, 50% a year, and you're like, well, 20% is great for me. It's about all I can handle right now. That's a problem. You're going to have a misalignment. And then what comes with the money? Ella talked a lot about the business assistance side of things. It isn't just about the money that counts. It's what comes with it. And most of the time, the organizations that we talked about on the capital continuum do have either some source of advisory services or can link you into advisory services. So really understand, what does that money what comes with that money? Is there access to networks that you could use? Is there access to advisory services, et cetera? And then lastly, what's their risk appetite? You know, if you really need equity, but you're talking to folks who really are risk averse, that's a misalignment. And then lastly, know your value proposition. What do I offer to a capital provider? I think oftentimes, you know, we need to do due diligence on both sides. As a lender, we do a lot of due diligence in understanding the management team and the value proposition of the business, but you also need to understand what you offer to that capital provider in terms of story, in terms of opportunity to get their money paid back, in terms of alignment as a partner. So know your value proposition before you go in and talk to a funder. So let's go to the next slide. Last but not least, this says it all, because again, it's not just about the money. If at this point people are feeling overwhelmed, where do I even start? There is help. Help is on the way. There's, again, many organizations out there that are willing to sit down and talk with you, even if you're not a fit. So don't forget to raise the flag and say, help, I'm not sure where to start. Because any one of us along that continuum can start you on that and help you get where you need to go. And it's really about asking the right questions to make sure we understand where you want to take the business, how big, how fast you want to grow. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and I'm happy to answer questions down the road and send out links to the resources we talked about.
Thank you so much, Janice. That was a lot of really helpful information, and thank you so much, Ella, for walking us through all of those valuable resources. So we ran a little bit over, which is great. We covered what we needed to cover. I'm going to quickly walk through, I want to show you these capital resources. I'm not going to go through one by one, but just so you know that they're there. I'm going to post this PowerPoint and the webinar recording to our website. I'll show you that as well. In terms of Q&A, I saw that a few questions came in, so what I'll do is I'm going to sit down after and field those questions with Janice and Ella, and we'll reach out to you via email and just make sure we get those questions answered for you. So there's a wide array of capital resources across the state. It could be community lenders, government lenders, angel investors, venture capital, crowdfunding, grant or incentive programs. There's a list all through the Agency of Agriculture here, Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then there's federal programs as well. So we have some great listings from the United States Department of Ag. And here you'll want to just jot this down. This is where we'll post everything for you. And as you sign up for the webinar, we have your email addresses, so I'll make sure to shoot all this information out to you as well. And thank you very much. I hope this was helpful, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We're going to sign off.